books. One is the Eitz Chaim. We're going to look at it in English. So even if you don't read Hebrew, pull it out. Everyone needs one. And then later, we're going to actually put it away and go back to the prayer book. So make sure that that is available to you if you would. And I will share two things. One kind of related to the sermon, the other utterly not. I wanted to mention as you came in today, and I introduced the Torah service by talking about this beautiful room, that this may be the most beautiful you've seen this room in a long time. The carpets were redone. There are new speakers. Hopefully they will work. There are bulbs in every fixture. And if you had been counting, not that I was looking, there were 14 that were out as of last week. Do you know what you need to do in order to change these light bulbs? Imagine, yes, you guys saw it. You need to remove the chairs. You need to bring in a big lift, takes you all the way up. This was a building flaw in making the building. How do you change the light bulbs? So all that was done. So I'm so grateful to the staff here that does that. And if you could take a moment, if you see people, if you see Andrew or Martine or Jake or Kelly, say thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks, Sarah. There's a lot of work that happens to make this place beautiful. There are no more stains on the carpet. That one that was right there used to really bug me. So it's just good. I'm grateful. I'm happy. The other piece of introduction is I will often weave my sermon around the Bar Bat Mitzvah. This one has a link to Phoebe, but it also is connected to this being the last Bar Bat Mitzvah of this particular class. There are 3 rows from the back right there, a whole gaggle of wonderful young people who've had extraordinary B'nai Mitzvah this year. So I want to leave you with a sense of how do you read this book moving forward. Because I have to tell you that when Phoebe and I were studying the portion, we came across some of the laws, and I believe that Phoebe's response was this word, ick. And my response was, it's problematic. By the way, there are a lot of laws in here. You kind of read them and you say, this doesn't feel ethical. This doesn't feel meaningful. And what do you do with those laws? Do you follow them just because they're in the book and this is the book we follow? And it's so important for me to clarify how we read difficult laws. Because amidst these difficult laws, there are so many amazing laws, it would be easy to say, I'm going to ignore those ones where Phoebe said ick and I said problematic. And I'm going to lift up the beautiful laws about treating animals and those who are in poverty and returning lost objects and not being indifferent. And there's amazing, soaring moral truths in this morning's portion that we need to pay attention to because they demand our action. But I also feel like we can't overlook the tough ones, the ones that don't make sense. So let me begin with an assertion that any observant Jew would make regardless of their movement. We are not biblical Jews. That might sound odd to people who say, aren't you the people of the book and isn't religion about the Bible? For Jews, religion is about the interpretive tradition, with the Bible as the beginning spot. I am a rabbinic Jew, meaning I am a product of generations of interpretation, of reinterpretation, of comparing one piece of detail to another piece. I'm a product of a people who says, you know what the book is when you read it carefully? It's actually a book with evolution in it. And sometimes the laws that are in Exodus, they're portrayed differently in Deuteronomy because the text itself is an evolving tradition. So I read this book and I don't need to say, ugh, I need to throw it out because it's not moral. I say I need to be part of the interpretive tradition, and I am a link in that tradition. So we read it not with critique, we read it with hearts that say, let me interpret. And I have to tell you, that's not an easy thing to do. Because whose interpretation do we follow? It leaves things a little chaotic. And actually, I would say it's the work of community to say that which is authoritative right now. That's hard work, and it's good work, and it's profound work. There's another piece to it. Sometimes we'll read a verse, and I'll say, this is what I think it means. And Brooke will say, this is what I think it means. And Sage will say, this is what I think it means. And Phoebe will say, oh, no, you're all wrong. And Adam will say, well, I think it might mean all of those things. We have multiple interpretations to every verse. And the capacity to hold on to multiple truths at the same time, which may in fact contradict, the ability to broaden and to narrow, the ability through interpretation to sometimes turn a verse on its head because it doesn't feel moral, that's who we are. That's why I love being a rabbi. But I know that sometimes when I open this book and people just read the part that makes them say, ick, that I need to give this context. My father was not a religious man. He's still alive. And he would read the Bible and say ick so often that it created distance from him, for him. I know there are so many people who read this book and see how people live some of the things that feel so immoral that it gives a bad name to anyone or everything that is religious. And we need to step back into our interpretive responsibilities that says, do not read this as a literal book. Do not read this as fundamentalists. Read this as people who must interpret, reinterpret, debate, wrestle. Yisrael means to wrestle. Because when you do, it speaks to you in new ways. When you do, it touches your soul. When you do, the concept of morality is first and foremost and primary. When you do, it allows your understanding of God to evolve. That for me is incredible. So let's look at examples. Go to page 1121. 1121, if you would. That's actually not the right page. 1131. 1131, please. 1131, chapter 24. And the law I'm going to read you is going to feel fairly benign. Verse 16. Parents shall not be put to death for children's actions. Isn't that a relief? And the flip side is children shall not be put to death for parents. That's a big relief. A person shall be put to death only for their own crime. This is a radical embrace of individual and personal responsibility. And yay Deuteronomy. But now you have to go back to Exodus that gives an absolutely, seemingly contradictory law. Keep your little orange tab there and go to page 446. 443. I know I'm having you flip around a lot. That's part of the joy of study. 443. This is the middle of the Ten Commandments. God tells us not to worship idols. And then at the bottom of the page there, do you see the line? For I, the Lord your God, am an impassioned God. By the way, that's a sanitized translation. The Hebrew is Elkanah. I'm jealous. I'm angry. I'm vengeful. When I see idolatry, it makes me mad. And what does God say? I'm going to visit the guilt of parents on children unto the third and fourth generation of those who reject me. Okay, eyes up. What is it? Is it that there's guilt to the third and fourth generation? Or is it that everyone is responsible for their own actions? Which is it? The book is absolutely contradictory. So you might say, though, that renders it irrelevant. Or you might say, let me find an interpretation. And I pause because your interpretations here are every bit as important as anyone in tradition. And it's as you wrestle that you find more and more meanings. In fact, in the difficult are the deepest insights. So one strand of interpretations tries to find ways to reconcile the seeming contradictions. And they would say, you know what? It's true that there is consequence and even punishment for the acts of previous generations. Exodus is right. By the way, I agree with that. I agree with that. And I think in some ways there's generational accountability that needs to be required. By the way, that was also the way of the ancient Near East when we read this historically. And then it might be that the verse in Deuteronomy, you're responsible only for your own acts, not for your parents or your kids, is also true. And so what do I get to do is I get to hold on to both of those truths and synthesize them together. By the way, at the bottom of the page, 443, there is a fascinating explanation that says the Hebrew word is pakad. It's actually 444, the below the line. It says the verb pakad means to take note of. Reading this verse as God takes notes of the sins of parents inflicted on children and deals leniently with the children. So do you get that there are three different ways to read this contradiction? Yes, individual responsibility. Yes, that there are moments where our actions impact in ways that can't but be. Yes, we want to hold on to both of them. Yes, we need to know that maybe in accounting for the wrongs of our parents, it'll be noted that it isn't us. Each one of those is fascinating. Now I want to bring you to the Midrash. The Midrash is this book that tries to fill in the white space with story. And the Midrash imagines what happened at this moment. Note, by the way, that God is defined here as a jealous God. It seems that Moses had the chutzpah, according to the Midrash, to stand up to the jealous God. And the moment that God said, the Exodus verse, hey, I'm going to hold the third and fourth generation accountable, Moses stood up and spoke to God and said, what you're saying, God, is not right. By the way, I love a tradition full of chutzpah. And he said, you know, there are all of these people who had terrible parents who were very, very, very ethical people. King Hezekiah was incredibly ethical. His father Ahaz was a big idolater. Are you going to hold Hezekiah responsible? And you know what the Midrash has God saying? What you say is correct, Moses. I will change my decree. And that's how it explains the different law in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is a retelling, and it's a retelling where God has changed God's mind because of human voice regarding morality. By the way, are you following what that means? The implication is that our voice regarding that which is moral and immoral can move the divine as we are in partnership with the divine. That Midrash, and it happens in other places as well, that Midrash emboldens us to be those who read the text with our moral voices and challenge when we feel that it is not moral. The human voice of conscience must challenge God. And that's the rabbinic tradition, challenging, interpreting, revising, correcting, allowing law to evolve, change, and then religion stays relevant and is dynamic. Okay, I brought you a law in Deuteronomy that the Deuteronomy law seems very, very nice. Let's look at one that's very problematic. I don't know that this got a Phoebe ick, but it got a problematic head nod from me. Go to 1122. 1122. I like hearing all those pages turning. 1122. And I will also say that people who were not brought up in traditions that explain Judaism as an evolving interpretive religion could form a very skewed view of what religion is, and that's a sad thing for me. It takes away the glory of who we are. Page 1122. Very bottom of the page. No Ammonite or Moabite shall be admitted into the congregation. None of their descendants, even in the 10th generation, shall be admitted into the congregation of the Lord, because they didn't meet you with food and water on your journey after you left Egypt. They hired this sorcerer to curse you. Now go to verse 7. Never concern yourself with their welfare or benefit as long as you live. Okay, what do we say to that law? Problematic. I heard an ick over here echoing our friend Phoebe. This is a problematic law. It creates a whole nation as a generality. Is that right? What about people in that nation who are not like that? And it extends it to the 10th generation, saying, let's make generalities about these people forever. And it says, even if they're suffering, don't help them at all because we don't like them. This creates, on a certain level, let's name it, it's racist. It creates a mindset of other about a particular nation. It is so intensely problematic. I can't explain it, interpret it, or reinterpret it, but I'll read you what traditional commentators have said. One commentator said, this text uses exaggeration in order to teach a point of how when pain is inflicted upon you and your people, it does ripple through generations. That's true. Maybe this isn't to be read literally, but it's to be read in a broader way. There's a whole nother way to interpret, and that's to say the text teaches us about the worst part of ourselves. So therefore, I can read the story of the binding of Isaac, and I can say, I think that that's a part of Abraham that's problematic. Maybe this teaches us about how we treat people who are different. And we need to see the worst part of ourselves as we read the text. And it reminds us who not to be. And this isn't just me, 21st century rabbi, reading this and saying, yeah, I get to learn negative lessons. This is thousands of years ago, how the rabbis read this text. We have a tradition which can read in a critical way. And now follow this next piece. There are subsequent texts that subvert this text. We are constantly rereading the text, coming up with other stories that take the lesson and turn it on its head, because Judaism needs to constantly be growing. So, close this book. Take out this book. And I want you to open to page 418 to a story that I want everyone in this community to know. It's a story I spent a couple months studying with Phoebe's dad, and at the end of the story I said, I want the whole community to know this story. It's the story of Ruth. And what do we learn early in the story? We learn that Ruth was she was a Moabite. She was one of the terrible, terrible people whose people did not greet us. And they are not allowed into our community for how long? 10 generations. Ruth was a Moabite. Okay, geography. Moab is to the east where Jordan is now of Israel. There were famines all of the time. People would move during famines. The Israelites went to Moab. There was food. And there, the family that went, Avimelech, the sons Chilion and Machlon, the kids met nice Moabite women. Ruth, Orpah. And they actually found that these were wonderful women. Because when you treat people as humans rather than a group that's evil, you start to shift the narrative of how terrible the Moabites are. When the men in the story die, Machlon, Chilion, the husbands of Ruth and Orpah, Elimelech, the husband of Naomi. Naomi says, you know what? I'm going back to my homeland. The famine's over. And Naomi leaves. She could walk alone, but her daughters-in-law go with her. She urges them, go back, go back. It's a foreign place. There's nothing for you there. And Ruth demands to stay. And thus you see the famous, beautiful line towards the bottom of that page. The last paragraph. Ruth says, do not urge me to leave and turn back. Where you go, I'll go. Where you lodge, I'll lodge. Your people, my people. Your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. I will be buried. This and more may Adonai do to me, if anything but death parts me from you. The second you know someone, the second you learn about Ruth, all of the generalities about Moabites fade away. You realize that she's a person of loyalty, of love, and devotion. She goes to the fields and gleans for her mother-in-law. People notice her kindness and her devotion. This is the story of the power of kindness and connection to both overcome grief and to overcome national stereotypes that diminish and demean us. This is a story that responds to the law that says don't admit the Moabites, and it challenges us in a subtle way through stories and say, hey, there's some really good Moabites. And we only lose when we don't allow ourselves to see them. By the way, how did Ruth's story play out? Go to the last page in the prayer book, the end of chapter 4. By the way, this book will take you 10 minutes to read the whole thing. Read it. Read it today, or tomorrow. Page 422. Page 422. Ruth marries Boaz. They have a child who named was Obed. This is the second to last paragraph. Who then did Obed have a child? What was that child's name? Jesse. And then Jesse had a child. And what was Jesse's child name? David. By the way, that David, King David, the greatest monarch of our people. So Ruth was the great-grandmother of King David. Okay, I want you to follow this. Don't let the Moabites in. Oh my goodness, a Moabite woman is going to be the progenitor of our greatest king, who then becomes the progenitor of the Messiah. Talk about a sequel that turns a story on its head. Talk about a sequel that rejects that which is racist and wrong. We are a people who continue to evolve through story, through tradition. And if tradition stultifies and we just sit with the verse that feels wrong, we are not having fidelity to the tradition that is constantly evolving. And I worry that we've stopped that process of evolving, of wrestling, of finding new stories and new insights. That is who we are meant to be. Embrace and struggle with that which is in here that needs to be subverted, while at the same time embracing the moral grandeur that is its backbone. This is indeed a holy, holy book as we interpret it. Seek out other stories of how we can take prevailing narratives and turn them on its head through knowing story. I'm going to end with another story. This is a story I read this summer, in June, by Fania Oz Salvinger. She's a teacher at the University of Haifa, and she teaches at the Legal Clinic for Human Rights. And she writes about one of her students, a student named Shada Khatib. Shada Khatib lived in an Arab village, and that Arab village was one of those where an Iranian bomb, which came in retaliation for the destruction of the nuclear reactors, it was one of the few that got through Israel's missile defenses, which were so effective but not perfect. And it landed on her house, and she and many in her family died. And what Fania Oz Salvinger wanted to do was to bring the story of this Palestinian woman who sometimes get put into the category of enemy and other. She writes about Shada's smile, her tenderness, her courage to participate in discussions despite all the challenges Palestinian students in Israeli universities faced. She wrote about the work that was happening at the Clinic for Human Rights, where Shada was amongst the students who were trying to pursue equal housing rights for everyone, asylum seekers' rights for education, the rights of many underprivileged populations. She used the story as an opportunity to show disparity in Arab villages in terms of numbers of bomb shelters. Shada was someone who tried to make a difference in Israeli society, accepting Israel as a Jewish state and saying we can do better in terms of how we treat others. Fania Oz Salvinger wants us to see and esteem the Arab citizens who are contributing to a shared society based on justice. And I believe that at a time when we too frequently don't see it, we need to lift up the stories of Palestinians and Jews who are devoted to a common future and destiny. It's the stories that we tell and retell, visit and revise that shape who we are and who we're supposed to be and show us a way forward. May we allow these stories to penetrate our hearts and our hearts to find new stories and interpretive truths. Amen. Shabbat shalom. Okay, so Phoebe, I won't make you answer this, but what's the message? You'll tell me afterwards. The message I'd love you to take away is that you're now part of this people that reads, that interprets, that finds your voice, and then acts. And that ability to say, I need to live the ethical truths of this portion because that's what our world needs, because that keeps me focused on others, that helps me lead a meaningful life. My hope and my prayer is that you hold on to that message, that you live it, because it's such a piece of your core. You at your core are kind. You at your core are sensitive. You at your core listen thoughtfully. And I am praying and confident that those pieces of you can grow and grow and grow, and that this day can be a moment of embrace of that piece of you. You have brought us amazing blessing. We wish you mazal tov, and we celebrate the amazing person you are. Congrats. I'm going to grab Phoebe and take her next door so that everyone in the Power Hour can similarly wish her mazal tov. And they can meet the young woman who says ik sometimes.
We are continuing with the Musaf service, the additional service of Shabbat. We turn to page 184 for the Chatzi Kaddish, and then we'll do another Amidah together.